Hello, and welcome to another episode of Law and Sarasota. I'm your host, Adam Tabrouge. Today I'm very pleased to be joined by a good friend of mine, Terry Cromley. Terry, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Adam.
Terry, I always like to talk with people about what their inspiration was, why it is that they went into the law. What's the case with you?
I was actually teaching at the time. I was teaching high school in Lake County, Florida, and I was frustrated with our school board issues, and so I became interested in the legal aspects of what was going on with the school board there. And my interest in the legal troubles that we were having with our school board at the time led me to a desire to go to law school.
So where did you go?
I went to Stetson University in St. Pete.
And how long had you been out between college and then going to law school?
I was out for 6 years. I went to Rollins College in Winter Park, and I was looking for a job for a little while, and then I taught for 4 years, high school, Latin, and Spanish.
Wow. So how was your law school experience?
I really enjoyed law school. I'd never been around so many brilliant people, and the professors were just wonderful, and I just thought it was great. I would continue to go if I could.
So Terry, after you graduated from Stetson, tell us a little bit about your career path.
I immediately found a job in Bradenton, and I've been in Bradenton since 1997, which is when I graduated. And I originally worked for another firm, but in 2000 I joined up with Carlson, Meisner, Hart & Hazlitt. They did not have an office in Bradenton at the time, so I originally worked in the Clearwater office, but I wasn't there very long until we started planning to open up a Bradenton office, which we opened in 2001.
And tell us a little bit about your law firm and what kind of matters you handle.
Carlson, Meisner, Hart & Hazlitt has been in the Tampa Bay area for over 40 years. We have 4 offices in Clearwater, Newport Richey, Spring Hill, and of course my Bradenton office. We handle workers' compensation, Social Security disability, criminal law, personal injury law, including auto accidents, dog bites. We also do immigration and family law.
And you're also a member of the Sarasota County Bar Association.
I am.
Well, it's great to have you on the program because I wanted to talk with you about workmen's compensation and Social Security disability. Even though I'm a criminal defense attorney, I routinely get calls from people who have questions about these issues. So it seems like it's a legal matter that a lot of people are concerned with, both of these areas.
Unfortunately, it is. If everything went according to the way it was planned, it wouldn't be, but it never does. So unfortunately, it becomes a legal matter.
So let's talk about workmen's compensation first off. Could you give me an overview of what workmen's compensation is?
Sure, Adam. Workers' compensation was originally designed to protect employers from typical negligence lawsuits. So they buy workers' compensation insurance for their employees. Then when an employee is injured, they file a workers' compensation claim. Then the workers' compensation insurance company that represents that employer takes over the care for that injured employee. So the injured employee goes to the doctors that the workers' compensation insurance company sends them to. They receive lost wages and medical treatment through the workers' compensation insurance.
Now, tell me a little bit about the requirement for employers with respect to workmen's compensation. Does this apply to all employers in the state of Florida?
If they have more than 3 employees, they need to buy workers' compensation coverage. And also if they're involved in any way in the construction industry, even if they are only 1 employee, they need to have workers' compensation coverage.
What if it's, for instance, a contracting company and then they have different subcontractors that work for them? How do we make sure that those people are covered?
The general contractor is going to want to make sure that their subcontractor has coverage. If they don't, then the general contractor may become ultimately liable.
So I have a young man who called me recently, and unfortunately he had fallen off a ladder while he was engaged in a pest control job. If somebody suffers any kind of injury on the job, what's the first step that they should take?
They need to report it immediately to their employer and make sure that that employer files a notice of injury with their workers' compensation insurance company. And then the workers' compensation insurance company will take over and explain they need to go to this doctor or that doctor, and they will be in charge of authorizing what that doctor recommends.
All right. And by immediately, what do you recommend?
I would recommend immediately. I would recommend within a day. Get to the employer, notify your supervisor and or the owner, but make sure if you're just going with your supervisor directly over you, make sure that they have reported it to the appropriate people. The sooner the better. Even if you think that it's not such a big deal, what happens often, Adam, is people do a fall, like you said, off of a ladder, and they hurt their back, and it's like, oh, that's all right. I'm just going to go home. I'll sleep it off. Tomorrow it'll be better. And then they wait a little while, and a few days later, 5 days later, now it hurts. Well, if they haven't told the employer about it, it can become a problem. And also, you don't know what that injury will turn into later on. When you initially have an injury, it can not be so bad right now, but a month later, it can really become a problem. So if you've reported it when you were supposed to, and a month later it develops into something worse, then you're in good shape. But you need to report it immediately. One example is I've had actual workers' compensation claims for bug bites. And you think, not a big deal, but if it's a recluse spider, that recluse spider bites somebody and then it becomes infected, and you can lose your leg if that really is not treated right away. So those recluse spiders, I've had several of those cases, and that's a good example of, oh, not a big deal, I was bitten by a bug, but you want to report it.
What if somebody needs immediate medical attention, or if it's more of an emergency type situation? Are they going to be covered and compensated for their medical claims?
Definitely. If you need immediate assistance, you tell your employer, you contact the emergency squad, they come out and take you to the emergency room. Yes, the initial treatment at the emergency room is totally covered, but make sure you tell your employer about it. Don't just go on your own and not tell anyone.
So it seems like workman's compensation should be pretty straightforward. Under what circumstances would somebody possibly need the services of an attorney?
When they are not getting something. So, for example, they go to the emergency room and they tell them to follow up with a doctor, and the insurance company doesn't authorize the doctor. Or they go to that doctor and the doctor recommends physical therapy or an MRI or something. It doesn't matter what, or a referral to another doctor. Whatever it is that doctor recommends needs to be authorized. If it's not authorized right away, they need to come to me. The other example would be if they're not getting their wages, because they're supposed to get wages while the doctor has them off of work or on light duty and work is not available for them. So if something is not being provided, whether it's wages or medical treatment, they need to seek the advice of an attorney right away.
And then what is it actually that the attorney does? What is the work that you do to help somebody out?
We start off by filing a petition for benefits. So if you come to me and you've been injured and you say, Terry, my doctor wants me to have knee surgery, but the insurance company isn't giving it to me, then I file what's called a petition for benefits for the knee surgery. Then the insurance company has a chance to respond to that. If they respond, okay, great, we'll set the knee surgery, fine. If not, then we'll proceed towards a mediation. And then we try to get the issues resolved at mediation. If we're unable to get them resolved at mediation, then we will proceed to a hearing in front of a workers' compensation judge.
I understand that there were some changes in workmen's compensation law in recent years. How did those changes affect the overall system?
Unfortunately, in 2003, we had a number of changes that greatly affect the benefits for the injured workers. One of the biggest problems is they cut our attorney fees. And that sounds like it's my problem, not my client's problem. But in fact, it really is the client's problem, because oftentimes they can't hire an attorney, or an attorney won't go to a judge. In the example I just gave you of the process that we have to go to get to a judge, if the benefit that I'm going to get for my client is relatively minimal and I'm only going to receive $500 compensation for it, I can't afford to take that case in front of a judge. I can't afford to take 5 depositions and prepare a pretrial and write a trial memorandum and go to that and all of the other things related to trying a case if I'm only receiving a $500 or $1,500 fee. So what happens oftentimes is the injured workers go to attorneys to try to get representation, but we look at them and say, I'm sorry, I can't take this case because I can't afford to take it. So I don't do that generally. We try and work through it so that we can get the issues resolved. And I will take a case initially and do my best to get those benefits for the client. But that is a major problem for the client, that he has trouble finding representation. Another problem from the 2003 laws is their benefits have been cut as to their access for medical treatment. They used to be able to change several doctors. For example, if they didn't like their initial doctor that they had at the urgent care, then they could ask for a change of that doctor. Then if they got to the orthopedist and they didn't like the orthopedist, they could change the orthopedist. If they didn't like their pain management, they could change their pain management. Now they get one change of doctor. So you got to decide which doctor you like the least before you change. So people come to me, it's like, I don't really like the urgent care doctor. Well, let's not change him yet. Let's get you to the ortho and see what the ortho says. Then if you don't like the ortho, then we'll think about changing the ortho. So you kind of have to decide which best change to use. So that's another example of the changes that hurt the claimants.
You know, Terry, a lot of people think that they can sue for pain and suffering after they've been injured. What about in the workman's compensation situation?
Generally, no, but there are exceptions. I tell everybody this example. If I'm shopping at Publix, and I don't work at Publix, and there's a spilled milk in the aisle, and it's not been cautioned off, and no cones or ribbons or anything to keep us out, I slip in it, I fall, I break my leg. I can sue Publix for negligence and for pain and suffering and loss of enjoyment in life and all of that good stuff. But if a Publix employee walks right behind me, slips in the same milk, sustains the exact same injuries, they're not going to be able to sue Publix for the pain and suffering and the negligence. Was there negligence? Yes, I sued for it. Do they get to sue for it? No. That's the workers' compensation immunity, which is what the employer was really buying when they bought the insurance for you.
So if somebody pursues a workman's compensation action against their employer, should they worry about getting fired?
If they are fired for filing a workers' compensation claim, then they have an employment law action. So generally, no. Now, do employers always behave the way they should? Not necessarily, but legally they cannot do that.
Terry, let's say that somebody is injured and they're unable to return to work. What do we do with somebody like that?
Well, first they're going to get what we call temporary total or temporary partial benefits. You get temporary total benefits when the doctor has you totally off work. You get temporary partial benefits when the doctor has you on some restrictions, but your work doesn't have either as much work for you to do or any work at all for you to do. And so you're either off of work or you're working part-time or a different job that pays less. You get temporary partial benefits. Once you reach maximum medical improvement, those temporary benefits stop. So it doesn't matter if you can do the job that you did before or not. Once you've reached maximum medical improvement, your temporary benefits end. However, then we have the option of applying for permanent total disability benefits. And that doesn't happen in the majority of cases, obviously, but those are designed for people who cannot return to work in any capacity. And essentially, if we can prove that they're permanently totally disabled, then they receive those benefits until the age of 75.
So Terry, that's a good segue into our next topic, which is the topic of Social Security disability benefits. Could you give our viewers an overview of Social Security disability and what it's in place and how it works?
Yes, Adam. For Social Security disability benefits, there are generally two types of benefits that people apply for. There are some others too that don't come up as often, but the two major ones are Social Security disability and Social Security income. So SSD or SSI is how we abbreviate them. My job is the same for either one. I just have to prove that you're unable to work in any capacity due to physical and/or mental limitations. So I don't really concern myself with the eligibility of them in my job. However, that's the first thing that I have to talk with you about, is to see which one you're going to be eligible for, or both. So to become eligible for SSI, you essentially have to have no household income, or very little, no savings, no money, pretty destitute in order to be eligible for SSI benefits. To be eligible for SSD benefits, you have to have worked the last 20 out of the last 40 quarters. So what they do is they take a year, divide it into 4 quarters. So out of the last 10 years, you have to work 20 of the quarters before when you're claiming you began to become disabled.
And if you can show that you have that type of work history, then what's the next step for you and your client?
Well, then I decide, are they going to apply for SSI and or SSD? Just to let you know, if you're eligible for SSI, you receive monthly benefits that can be offset by other things, such as the value of rent. You know, if you're living with somebody and they're giving you free rent, they might offset that. So if you start off receiving $721 a month, they might say, oh yeah, but we're going to assign $150 of that to rent. So now you're going to get that much less a month. So you start at $721, but it can have deductions from it. But you also become immediately eligible for Medicaid, which is a great benefit to people that are in need of medical treatment. If you're eligible for SSD, then you become eligible 2 years and 5 months from when they decide you're disabled for Medicare. And also after the initial 5 months of a waiting period, you get monthly benefits at a much higher rate than you would with the SSI benefits. And that's based on what you've paid into the system. So those are the 2 types of benefits that you can get. What I do then, after I determine which one of those or both we're going to apply for you, is we do an initial application. And we do help you with initial applications at Carlson, Meisner, Hart, and Hazlitt. Some people will tell you, go ahead and apply, call us after you've been denied. We want to help you from the beginning if we can. So we will help you with the initial application. If you get denied with the initial application, the next step is called a request for reconsideration. If you are denied at the request for reconsideration level, then the next step is to request a hearing. When you request a hearing, you then have to wait approximately 12 to 14 months to see a judge here in this area. It differs around the United States, but in the Tampa Bay area right now, we've got a 12 to 14 month wait to see a judge.
Terry, how is it that somebody establishes that they have a disability and are unable to work? You mentioned earlier that it's your job to help prove that type of claim. What do you mean when you use the word proof in this context?
It's basically going to be that we need to prove your limitations. It's not really your diagnosis. Some diagnoses, yes, you can be fast-tracked and get disability, stage 4 brain cancer, okay, but the back injuries, the knee injuries, things like that, we're really concentrating on what the limitations are. So can you stand? If so, for how long? How long can you sit? Do you need to lie down during the day? Do you need to take naps during the day? Do you need to elevate your legs during the day? Can you stoop? Can you squat? Can you bend? Those types of limitations are what we're really concentrating on from a physical standpoint.
Now, you've mentioned that if somebody is initially denied, it may take a year or so before you're able to get in front of a judge. When you go in front of the judge, what is it that you're trying to show at that point?
I present to the judge all of the medical records that we have. I prepare a trial memorandum that shows why these limitations meet the qualifications for Social Security disability. And the judge and I question you and we find out from you exactly how these limitations and how the pain and everything affects you on a daily basis and what you're able to do. So then the judge renders a decision based on your testimony and based on the medical evidence, whether or not you qualify for disability under their guidelines.
What if the judge rules against you? Are there any other remedies that are available?
There are. The first step is to apply to the appeals council, and if the appeals council thinks that the judge failed in some way and rendered a wrong decision, not necessarily that he got it wrong, but he did something wrong. He didn't consider this medical evidence, or he didn't consider this doctor, and he put more weight on a doctor who'd never seen him versus a doctor who treated him for 5 years, something like that. I can write an appeal to the appeals council and request that hopefully that we will get another hearing. Occasionally the appeals council will just say, hey, the judge got it wrong, they win. But that's rare. What typically will happen at the appeals council level is it will be remanded and the client will get a new hearing.
Terry, what about family members? For instance, if you had minor children, is there any remedies for them?
Yes, we also represent minor children for SSI claims. Again, it's the same eligibility. You have to be financially needy, like I discussed before. But if your household income falls below a certain level and your client or your child requires continuing medical treatment, whether it's mental or physical. So I've represented children who failed to thrive from birth. Children with medical problems such as kidney issues, things like that. I also represent a lot of children with ADHD. Now, every ADHD child is not going to qualify, but if it's so severe that the child is getting continuing treatment with a psychiatrist and counseling, and they're on medication all the time, and they're even on the medication, they're still having a lot of difficulty in school, then we can also get benefits for that child as well.
You've mentioned several times mental limitations. So is it correct that disability is not limited to physical disabilities?
Exactly. It can be for mental, physical, or a combination of both. We see a lot of claimants with PTSD, with bipolar disorder, and again, everyone with those issues is not necessarily disabled, but it depends on how significant their problems are and their limitations. If their limitations are such that they really can't function socially, they can't leave the house, they can't talk with people, they become really angry and fly off the handle all the time at customers or fellow workers, then that obviously is going to limit their job pool significantly, and they become a good candidate for disability.
Well, Terry, we've been talking in general terms about the benefits that are available. Approximately, what are we talking about for somebody who's looking for disability benefits?
The SSI benefits, as I indicated, start at $721, but they can be chipped away. The SSD benefits are going to be significantly higher depending on what you've paid in. So if you've got a really good work history, they could be $1,200 and up a month. And then the most important thing is you become eventually eligible for Medicare, which that's the best benefit for the people that really need the medical treatment, because most of the claimants who come to me don't have alternate sources of medical treatment. So they're going to the county health department for the most part, or they're going to Manatee Glens or other places like that.
Well, Terry, all of this information is really helpful to our viewers, I hope. But there's one other area that I wanted to talk with you about as well. And you're very active in the community. I know you up in Manatee County, and presently I believe you're serving as president of the Florida Association of Women Lawyers, the Manatee chapter. Tell us a little bit about FALL, as we call it.
Yes, I've been active in Manatee Fall for many years. I really love that organization. It's a great group. You misspoke a little bit. I'm going to clarify it. You said Florida Association of. It's Florida Association for Women Lawyers, and I point that out because you, of course, are a member. So it's not just women lawyers. We have male attorneys in there as well, and judges also. So it's just anybody that wants to help promote women lawyers, and it's a great networking tool, but my primary focus on it is the fundraising that we like to do for the different organizations in the community. Several years ago, Manatee Fall decided that each year we would adopt a different local charity and support them throughout the year with their different fundraisers that they do. But then at the end of the year, we do a fundraiser for them too, to raise money for them. And we've sponsored people like Pace Center for Girls and Feeding Empty Little Tummies last year. This year we're helping out We Care, which is a great organization that provides medical care, specialty medical care to people in need. So we're real excited about that this year. So if anyone knows of any organizations out there that you'd like us to help, we'd be happy to hear from you.
And that's one reason I continue to be a member of Fall, is I really see that organization as doing as much for the community as any other legal organization that I belong to. A few years back, you were working with the Bill Galvano One Stop Center in Bradenton, yes. A charity that I really support, and I'm very delighted that you continue in that tradition. So Terry, what do you think the lawyer's role is in terms of community service?
I think it's very important that lawyers become involved in community service. My favorite thing is doing it through Fall, but then what happens is we become involved with One Stop, as we were, and then we continue to help them, even though we've adopted a new charity the next year. Sometimes people become very involved with that charity, and they become on the board of that, they join the boards of those charities. So it's a great way for us to become familiar with the different community organizations. But everyone I know, all of the attorneys I know, have pet projects. They all have, many of them serve on boards of charities. I don't serve on any boards because I've kind of spread myself out over many of them. But I think it's very important for attorneys to be active in the community, and I do everything I can to become active in the community.
Well, Terry, I really appreciate you coming on the program today to help our viewers learn more about workmen's compensation, about Social Security disability. And may people call you if they have specific questions or cases that they'd like you to look at.
Certainly call me on any questions regarding workers' compensation, Social Security disability, or any area that we practice, criminal, personal injury as well.
Well, Terry, again, thank you very much for being a guest on Law in Sarasota. And thank you for watching another episode of Law in Sarasota.